RomCalms, where romance and relaxation meet. Subscribe for a new romance novella every week. Desert Rose, presented by RomCalms. Chapter 1. The city of Cairo, bathed in the gold of an Egyptian sunset, was a sight to behold from the window of an incoming plane. The sun painted the desert and the cityscape alike with its rich hues, making the Nile River shimmer like a liquid diamond, carving its way through the heart of Egypt. Sarah Mitchell, securely strapped into her seat on Flight 627, gazed out at this breathtaking view with wide-eyed wonder. Her heart pounded in rhythm with the plane's hum as it descended closer to what would be her home for many months to come. Sarah had often dreamt about this moment. As a child growing up in small-town Illinois, she had been fascinated by stories of ancient civilizations and their wonders. The pyramids, those enduring symbols of human ingenuity and testament to ancient Egypt's grandeur, had always held a special place in her imagination. Now, here she was, an archaeology student from America, entrusted with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, restoring one such forgotten pyramid back to its former glory. Her excitement bubbled within her like champagne in a flute, effervescent and unstoppable. As soon as the plane touched down on Egyptian soil and taxied across Cairo International Airport's busy runway, Sarah collected her belongings and disembarked. She took a deep breath as she stepped into the terminal. There was something enchanting about breathing in foreign air for the first time that made it feel like some subtle initiation ritual into a new adventure. She quickly spotted Professor Jenkins waving at her from across the bustling airport lobby, crowded with eager faces, speaking animatedly in Arabic or broken English. With him were two other students from back home who were part of this expedition, Danny and Lizzie. "Welcome to Cairo." Professor Jenkins greeted Sarah warmly, shaking hands while helping her manage luggage filled with research materials and essentials. "Thank you," Sarah replied breathlessly. She looked around at everything, soaking up the sights, sounds, and smells of the Cairo airport. As they walked out of the airport into the warm evening air, Sarah could see silhouettes of tall minarets and domes against the darkening sky, an illuminated skyline that whispered tales of a rich cultural past and echoed promises of discoveries yet to be made. She felt a shiver run down her spine. They all piled into a van waiting outside, its driver waving enthusiastically at them, as if old friends reunited after long. In broken English, he introduced himself as Mustafa and assured them lightheartedly that despite Cairo's infamous traffic, he would ensure their safe arrival at their accommodation. As the van started up with a jolt and sped onto Cairo's vibrant streets, lit by twinkling fairy lights adorning shops and cafes bordering them, Sarah took one last look back at the airport, fading away in distance. This was it. The journey had just begun. Sarah had barely set her last suitcase down in the cozy, modest guest house when Professor Jenkins announced they would be meeting their Egyptian counterpart that evening. "His name is Khaled," he informed them as they gathered around a makeshift conference table, "a historian with extensive knowledge about these pyramids and an invaluable asset to our project." The prospect of meeting an actual Egyptian historian intrigued Sarah greatly. She was eager to learn from someone who had grown up surrounded by these relics of history she had only read about in books. As dusk fell over Cairo, painting the cityscape with hues of purples and blues, Sarah found herself standing outside a quaint cafe at the heart of the city. She was waiting for her team, and this enigmatic historian named Khaled. Her heart swelled as she watched families and friends gather around tables filled with steaming cups of coffee and aromatic plates of local delicacies. The air buzzed with laughter and chatter in Arabic, all under a sky glittering with stars. It was a scene straight out of a postcard. Suddenly, she heard Professor Jenkins call out her name. Turning around, she saw him waving at her from across the street, accompanied by Danny, Lizzie, and another man. Tall, his dark hair slightly tousled, and eyes as deep-set as the Nile itself. Khaled. Something stirred within Sarah when their eyes met for the first time. It felt like a faint echo from some forgotten past, or perhaps a whisper from an unknown future. His gaze held stories untold, tales steeped in history that traced back generations, just like the pyramids they were here to restore. Ahlan wa sahlan. Khaled greeted Sarah warmly once introductions were made, offering his hand in greeting. His voice was deep yet gentle. It resonated within her like a melody composed on ancient instruments. Shukran, she replied softly, shaking his hand. His grip was firm and his touch sent an unexpected shudder through her. The evening passed in a blur of Egyptian cuisine, history discussions, and laughter. Khaled proved to be as knowledgeable as Professor Jenkins had claimed him to be. He spoke passionately about the pyramid they were set to restore and its significance in Egypt's grand historical narrative. Yet what fascinated Sarah even more was Khaled himself. He was a man who wore his culture proudly like a badge of honor, whose eyes lit up every time he spoke about his homeland and its glorious past. Sarah learned that Khaled hailed from a family with deep roots in Egyptian history. His ancestors were believed to have been caretakers of pyramids centuries ago, passing down knowledge and secrets from one generation to another like sacred lore. As the night grew older and the moon bathed Cairo streets in an ethereal glow, Sarah found herself engrossed in conversation with Khaled. They sat huddled over old maps of Cairo, sipping on piping hot mint tea while discussing theories about the pyramid's ancient inhabitants. She marveled at how effortlessly their thoughts intertwined, like two pieces of a jigsaw puzzle fitting perfectly together. When it was finally time to part ways for the night, Sarah felt a strange sense of longing. As she watched Khaled disappear into the bustling Cairo streets under twinkling fairy lights strung around old buildings, she couldn't help but feel an inexplicable pull towards him, an enigma waiting to be unraveled, just like the pyramid they were here to restore. Chapter 2. Sarah could feel her heart pounding with excitement as they made their way towards the pyramid. The sandy terrain was tough to navigate, but none of them seemed to mind. Each step brought them closer to what they were here for, unraveling history one grain of sand at a time. As they neared the pyramid, Sarah couldn't help but stand in awe of its grandeur and timeless beauty. At this moment, under the orange hue of setting sun, it looked more like a painting than an actual structure before her eyes. Khaled watched her from a distance as she stood marveling at the colossal structure, her face lit with fascination and awe. He couldn't help but admire her passion. It mirrored his own love for Egypt's enduring heritage. "Sarah," he called out, beckoning her towards him, "come take a look at this." He held up an old parchment with faded hieroglyphics etched into it. Sarah hurried over to him, curiosity piqued. She looked over his shoulder at the ancient text, trying to decipher its meaning. After a brief discussion about interpretations and theories, they concluded that the pyramid possibly held a secret chamber still undiscovered. In the coming days, Sarah and Khaled found themselves drawn together. Their conversations became more frequent, extending beyond the realm of historical facts and archaeological methods. They began to talk about their dreams and fears, about their pasts and aspirations for the future. The line between professional collaboration and personal connection grew blurred with each passing day. One evening, after an intense day at the site, they sat under a canopy of stars, sharing stories over cups of sweet mint tea. Khaled talked about his childhood spent in the shadow of pyramids, listening to tales spun by his grandfather. His family had been caretakers of these ancient structures for generations, a fact that filled him with immense pride. "My great-grandfather used to say that our ancestors were given this sacred responsibility by Pharaoh Khafre himself, all the way back at the time of their creation," Khaled said with a twinkle in his eyes. "They protected these resting places of gods from grave robbers." Sarah listened attentively, her eyes alight with curiosity and admiration. She asked him more about his family history, her questions thoughtful and considerate. Their conversation flowed like the Nile itself. "I can't believe your family has been looking after these pyramids for centuries," Sarah said, her eyes wide with fascination. Khaled chuckled softly, his gaze on the ancient structure before them. "Neither can I sometimes," he admitted. "It's a heavy responsibility to carry." As Khaled narrated tales infused with mystery and heritage, Sarah couldn't help but feel a deep sense of respect for him. Here was a man who was deeply rooted in his culture, yet open to sharing it with others. This openness made her feel closer to him than she had felt towards anyone else in recent times. Underneath Cairo's twinkling city lights, which seemed far removed from their secluded site, amidst tales of pharaohs long gone and whispers of legends forgotten by time, but preserved within Khaled's lineage, something began to change between them. Their shared laughter floated into the night air, mixing with the soft murmurs of the wind, and they sat there, two silhouettes against the backdrop of a sky studded with stars. Sarah felt a flutter in her heart when Khaled's hand brushed against hers as he passed her another cup of tea. It was accidental, she knew, but it stirred something within her, a longing for more than just companionship. She looked at him, his eyes reflecting the moonlight, his face an embodiment of ancient Egyptian charm. The moment lingered like sand caught in an hourglass. As Sarah walked back to her tent later that night, she found herself smiling at nothing in particular. She couldn't deny it anymore. She was falling for Khaled. Chapter 3. Sarah woke up at the dig site to a peculiar tint in the skies. Cairo was known for its clear blue skies, but today they were swirling with shades of ochre and vermilion. A sandstorm was brewing. As an archaeologist, she knew better than to ignore Mother Nature's warning signs, especially in the desert. "Do you think we should call off today's work?" Sarah asked Khaled as they stood in front of the pyramid. Khaled gazed at the horizon where the storm seemed to be gathering strength. "I think we should," he said finally. His voice held a note of concern that somehow comforted Sarah. Within the hour the storm hit and visibility dropped near zero. Everyone retreated indoors except for Sarah, who found herself stranded near the pyramid due to her late start back from the dig site. With sand whipping around her like enraged spirits, she somehow managed to find shelter in a small hut nearby used by workers for breaks. As she struggled to catch her breath, a silhouette appeared through the sandy haze. It was Khaled coming towards her. Relief washed over her as she watched him push through the storm with determination etched on his face. Once inside, Khaled placed a comforting hand on her shoulder before sliding down onto an empty crate across from her. The simple touch sent warmth spreading through her body despite their harsh surroundings. The storm raged outside while they sat inside the small hut, wrapped in silence, except for their sporadic breathing and occasional gusts rattling against their temporary refuge. As time went on, the silence between them grew heavy. It was not uncomfortable, but filled with unspoken words and emotions waiting to break free. Finally, Khaled broke the silence. He started talking about his life in Egypt, about his childhood spent chasing after friends in narrow alleys of Cairo, about late-night history lessons from his grandfather under starlit skies by the Nile, about his dreams of contributing towards Egyptian history. Sarah listened intently as he spoke, her heart swelling with each word that painted a vivid picture of who Khaled truly was. Compassionate yet passionately driven. His love for his homeland was palpable and infectious. It made her appreciate Egypt more deeply than any textbook or lecture ever could. Feeling inspired by Khaled's openness, Sarah decided to share her journey too. She told him about her fascination with archaeology that sparked during a field trip she took as a child to an American Indian reservation. She shared stories of how she would sneak out at night to gaze at stars, wondering what tales they held within their celestial spheres. Her eyes sparkled as she recounted her journey from being a small-town girl dreaming big dreams to becoming an archaeology student working on an actual Egyptian pyramid. As they delved deeper into their pasts and dreams for future, they found common ground in their shared passion for history and exploration. There were moments when their eyes locked onto each other's during their heartfelt exchange. Moments when smiles lingered longer than necessary. Moments when laughter rung out amidst desert's eerie silence. Moments that painted a vivid picture of the chemical connection between them. The desert night had descended upon them like a thick velvet cloak, the stars twinkling like motifs stitched into its fabric. The sandstorm had passed, leaving behind an uncanny serenity that blanketed Cairo. Sarah and Khaled sat in the dimly lit hut, their bodies weary from the day's events, but their spirits ablaze with a newfound bond. Sarah found herself stealing glances at Khaled, who was looking out of the window at what remained of the storm. His eyes held a thoughtful glint, his lips curved slightly upward, as if he was lost in a pleasant memory. She found herself yearning to know what thoughts were brewing in his mind. "Khaled?" she called out softly, breaking the comfortable silence that had wrapped around them. He turned towards her with an inviting smile that made her heart flutter. "Yes, Sarah?" "I wanted to thank you," she said earnestly, "for today, for being there." Khaled's smile deepened as he replied warmly, "You don't have to thank me, Sarah. We're in this together." As they looked at each other across the small room filled with shadows dancing under weak lamplight, they both felt an undeniable pull, a magnetism that was quietly growing between them since they first met under Cairo's blazing sun. After what seemed like an eternity trapped within shared glances and unspoken promises, they finally decided to call it a night. As Khaled held open the door for her to step out into Cairo's cool night air, Sarah felt his fingers brush against hers, a touch so light yet so potent that it left her skin tingling. They walked back to their quarters through a barren landscape bathed in moonlight, the silence around them punctuated by the distant hoot of an owl and their synchronized footsteps. The pyramid loomed majestically ahead of them under the star-studded sky, its ancient secrets sealed within its stone heart. Once they reached their shared building, Khaled turned towards Sarah. "Good night, Sarah," he said softly, his dark eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Good night, Khaled," she replied with a smile before retreating into her room. As she closed the door behind her, leaving Khaled outside under the desert sky, she leaned against it with a gentle sigh. Chapter 4. The sun was a blazing orb sinking into the horizon as Sarah and Khaled climbed the steps of the pyramid. Their footsteps echoed in the empty expanse, their bodies casting shadows on the coarse sandstone. The air was thick with anticipation as they approached an unexplored chamber within the ancient structure. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, her mind filled with images of undiscovered artifacts, remnants of a civilization long lost to time. She glanced at Khaled, who had an inscrutable look on his face. His dark eyes shimmered under the setting sun, reflecting his deep connection with this land and its history. "This is it," he said quietly, breaking her concentration. He gestured towards a narrow opening barely visible in the dim light. "I removed a pile of broken stone last night, blocking this small passageway. I think this is what we've been looking for." Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Sarah followed him into the hidden chamber. The cool darkness enveloped them like a ceremonial cloak, eliciting shivers down her spine. She flicked on her flashlight and gasped at what she saw. The chamber was filled with ornate hieroglyphics etched into every available surface, from floor to ceiling, a true treasure trove of history. Her eyes widened in awe as she traced the intricate designs and symbols with trembling fingers. "Look at this," she exclaimed, pointing towards an unusual symbol that repeated itself throughout the chamber, a falcon hovering over an open hand. Khaled moved closer to inspect it, his breath hitched as recognition dawned in his eyes. That's my family symbol," he murmured almost incredulously. Sarah turned towards him sharply. "What?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, it's been passed down through generations." Silence fell between them as they digested this revelation. Khaled's ancestral connection to this very pyramid they were restoring held more significance than either of them could have ever anticipated. The forgotten pyramid was no longer just an archaeological site. It was a link to Khaled's lineage, his heritage. Sarah looked at Khaled standing amidst the echoes of his own history, his figure illuminated by the soft light. His eyes held a faraway look as he traced the symbol with a fingertip, lost in the depths of a past that had suddenly come alive around him. The discovery led them to spend countless hours working together in the chamber. They examined every inch of it, documenting and photographing everything for further research, while understanding more about Khaled's ancestors. One evening, after a particularly long day, they found themselves sitting on the cool stone floor of the chamber. The only light was from their torches, casting playful shadows on their tired faces. "You know," Sarah began pensively, "when I signed up for this project, I never imagined we'd uncover something so monumental." Khaled glanced at her with a soft smile. "And I never thought I'd find my ancestry so intertwined with our work." "Your family symbol?" Sarah said, her voice echoing softly within the chamber. She turned towards him, her eyes wide with astonishment. Khaled simply nodded, his gaze still fixed on the falcon hovering over an open hand. He seemed lost in thought, an echo from distant past, whispering secrets into his ear. They fell into a comfortable silence as they sat side by side in the chamber that had become their shared sanctuary, a place where past and present merged, where history intertwined with personal stories, and where two hearts found an unexpected connection amidst ancient ruins. In those moments of shared laughter and quiet companionship within the cold stone walls echoing tales from centuries ago, Sarah realized that her feelings for Khaled were no longer professional or a simple crush. She was falling in love with him. Khaled seemed to sense the shift in her emotions as he turned towards her with a gentle smile on his face. Their eyes locked, holding each other's gaze for what felt like an eternity. The air between them tingled with unspoken words and untold feelings, and as they sat there amidst ancient hieroglyphics whispering secrets of a long-forgotten past, Sarah knew that their journey together had only just begun. Chapter 5. Sarah's heart pounded as she carefully brushed away the last particles of sand from the artifact. In her hands lay a magnificent golden amulet, its luster untouched by time, bearing the same falcon overhand emblem that was now associated with Khaled's lineage. The discovery of this artifact marked a major breakthrough in their project. "Khaled," she called out, excitement bubbling in her voice. "Come look at this." Khaled hurried over to where Sarah was bent over her discovery. His eyes widened at the sight of the gleaming amulet. "Biosiris!" He breathed out, his usually composed face revealing genuine astonishment. "This is unbelievable." The rest of the day was abuzz with excitement as news of their discovery spread among both their team and local media. The forgotten pyramid they had been working on wasn't so forgotten anymore. As dusk fell upon Cairo, turning its bustling streets into shadowy silhouettes, Sarah found herself sitting atop one of the smaller structures near their site overlooking the cityscape. Khaled joined her soon after, carrying 2 cups of steaming mint tea. "I must admit," Khaled began as he handed her 1 cup, his dark eyes reflecting the twinkling city lights beneath them. "I never thought our journey would lead us here." Sarah smiled softly at him before taking a sip from her cup. "Neither did I." The discovery of the golden amulet was a game-changer. The following weeks were filled with frenzied activity as researchers, historians, and media personnel flocked to the site. Amidst all this chaos, there was an undercurrent of tension. The Egyptian government had taken notice of their find and was making claims on it. "The artifacts belong to Egypt's history," Khaled said one day, his face etched with worry. "But I fear they will be locked up in some private collection instead of being displayed in a museum where everyone can learn from them." Sarah watched him from across their makeshift office within the pyramid. His passion for preserving Egypt's rich heritage was one of the things she admired about him. "I understand your concern," she replied softly. "We'll do everything we can to ensure these treasures serve their purpose." Their work continued under the shadow of impending bureaucracy and potential legal battles over ownership rights. It wasn't long before they received official notice. Their project was put on hold until further resolution. Amidst ruins echoing with centuries-old secrets, Sarah found herself alone with Khaled on what could be their last night at the site together. She turned to look at him. His silhouette bathed in soft moonlight against Cairo's starlit skyline looked ethereally beautiful. "Khaled," she began hesitantly, her heartbeat echoing loudly in her ears. He turned towards her questioningly. "Sarah." He started speaking at the same time, causing both of them to chuckle nervously. "You first," Sarah insisted, her heart pounding as she decided to seize this moment before it slipped away. He nodded before taking a deep breath. "Sarah, He paused, looking unsure before continuing resolutely. "I know our worlds are different, but these past few months with you have been more meaningful than any other in my life." He reached out to hold her hand, his touch sending electric jolts through her bloodstream. His dark eyes were full of emotions that mirrored hers. "I don't know what the future holds for us, but I want you to know that I love you." Sarah's breath hitched at his confession. She looked into his eyes, filled with earnest affection, and saw her own feelings reflected back. "I love you too, Khaled," she said, her voice a mere whisper, yet the 5 words carried the weight of an elephant. The moon bore witness to their confessions as they spent their last night together under Cairo's starlit sky, cherishing every moment. They talked about everything and nothing, about their dreams, fears, successes, and failures, making memories that would last them a lifetime. As dawn broke over Cairo and they packed up their equipment from the site, there was an unspoken promise between them. They wouldn't let this be the end of their journey together. Sarah looked around at the deserted site that had been their home for months. The rustle of the desert wind was the only sound, as if nature itself was mourning their departure. The pyramid stood tall under the moonlight, its secrets partially unveiled by them. Khaled approached her, his eyes reflecting a turmoil of emotions. He had been quiet since they left their makeshift office, lost in his thoughts. Sarah knew he was grappling with feelings of loss, both for the project and for what could have been between them. He reached out to cup her face gently, causing her skin to tingle at his touch. His dark eyes bore into hers with an intensity that took her breath away. "I don't know what tomorrow holds," he confessed softly, "but I do know that you have become an integral part of my life, professionally and personally." As they parted, their foreheads rested against each other while they caught their breaths. The city of Cairo stood witness to their blossoming love, an oasis of light amidst the vast desert. "We'll find our way back to each other," he vowed softly, before capturing her lips once more in a gentle kiss. And so beneath the watchful gaze of the forgotten pyramid and under the canopy of countless stars, they made promises, some spoken aloud, others whispered into the silence of the night. Chapter 6. Sarah stood at the edge of the bustling Cairo airport, her heart heavy with a myriad of emotions. The ancient city that had once seemed so alien to her now felt like home. Her eyes scanned the terminal one last time before she turned to face Khaled, who stood beside her, his usually sparkling hazel eyes clouded with an undeniable sadness. "Khaled," Sarah began, her voice barely above a whisper, as she fought to keep her tears at bay. "I don't want this to be goodbye." He reached out, gently tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was soft and reassuring. "This isn't goodbye, love," he said quietly, offering her an affectionate smile. "It's just till we meet again." His endearing term of affection warmed her heart and momentarily eased the ache of leaving him behind. Sarah truly believed she had found something unique in each other amidst the ancient ruins and golden sand dunes, a love that was as timeless as the pyramids themselves. A loudspeaker announcement echoed through the terminal, indicating that it was time for Sarah's flight back home. She took a deep breath, gathering courage for what she knew would be one of the hardest farewells she'd ever had to make. At the entrance to security check-in, they stopped and faced each other one last time. Words were unnecessary, as their hearts echoed sentiments too profound for language. Khaled pulled Sarah into an embrace, a silent pledge that distance would not tarnish what they had built together. "I'll be waiting for you, Sarah," Khaled whispered into her ear as he reluctantly pulled away, his voice barely audible amidst the airport's cacophony. "Egypt won't be the same without you." Sarah nodded, unable to trust her own voice. She looked into his eyes one last time before turning around and heading towards security. As she made her way through the bustling crowd, she couldn't help but steal glances back at Khaled, who stood watching her until she was out of sight. She boarded the plane with a heavy heart, looking back one last time at the city that had given her unforgettable memories and a love that transcended borders. As the plane began its ascent, Sarah pressed her forehead against the cool window pane, watching as Cairo, now a part of her soul, disappeared beneath cotton candy clouds. As Sarah settled into her seat and closed her eyes, images from Egypt flooded back. Khaled's smile under starlit skies, their shared laughter echoing through ancient ruins and stolen kisses amidst golden desert dunes. While leaving him behind was painful, it also reinforced what she had known all along. Home was no longer just a place. It had transformed into a person named Khaled. Back in America, Sarah found herself walking aimlessly through the sterile halls of her university. The once familiar surroundings now felt foreign and dull compared to the vibrant energy of Cairo. She missed Khaled's soft laughter, his insightful remarks about history, and their shared moments under the starlit Egyptian sky. She tried to immerse herself into her old routine, attending lectures, discussing archaeological theories with her classmates, and spending hours in the library buried in textbooks. However, none of it could fill the void that Khaled had left behind. Sarah would often find herself daydreaming during lectures, recalling how Khaled would passionately explain ancient hieroglyphics or share fascinating tales about Egypt's past. Each memory was a bittersweet reminder of what she had left behind, a love that had bloomed amidst desert dunes and ancient ruins. Months had passed since Sarah had left the sun-soaked city of Cairo and returned to her familiar existence in America. She found herself living a life that seemed much like it did before her trip, but with a hollow void that echoed of Khaled's presence. Her thoughts often wandered back to the bustling streets of Cairo, the majestic pyramids, and most importantly, to the enigmatic historian who had captured her heart. One evening, when Sarah returned home after a long day at university, she found an envelope sitting on the kitchen counter, an envelope bearing a postmark from Egypt. Her heart leapt with hope as she recognized Khaled's elegant handwriting on the front. Trembling fingers tore open the envelope, revealing a handwritten letter and something wrapped in delicate tissue paper. Carefully unwrapping it revealed a beautiful desert rose, its crystalline structure glistening under the kitchen lights, reminding Sarah of sun-kissed mornings back in Cairo. The letter read, "Dear Sarah, I hope this letter finds you well. Cairo misses you, as do I. Remember our promise? We said we'd meet again someday. I believe there is still work left for us in Egypt. They are letting us reopen the pyramid on the 1st of the month. Return to me, to the secrets waiting to be unearthed from beneath time-worn stones, and perhaps a love story that deserves a proper ending. Be well and remember, Egypt awaits your return. Yours, Khaled." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she clutched the letter to her heart. Suddenly the world didn't seem so vast and distances not insurmountable. Overwhelmed with joy and hope, she knew what she had to do. The next morning found her booking her ticket back to Cairo, back to Khaled, back to their unfinished symphony. She knew their journey was far from over. It had merely been paused. The pyramid they were restoring still held secrets waiting to be unraveled, much like their own love story, which deserved a fair chance. As she zipped up her suitcase, she looked at the desert rose, now sitting proudly on her bedside table, serving as a reminder of an unbroken promise between two souls who found love amidst ancient ruins under Egypt's vast sky. With a full heart, Sarah set off for Cairo once more. As the plane took off into the velvety night sky, Sarah felt an undeniable sense of coming home.